Yeah.
Ah, welcome. So, like today I want to explore the journey around. I say like the journey around like expressing anger, but it feels like deeper than that. Like the journey of expression and like coming into fullness and um, how much we tend to keep everything at bay. Like we were just talking about prior to this episode, like keeping the cap on and holding back our fullness and our full expression. Like there's something wrong without our fullness and being in, I guess, like our wildness and our expression and our authenticity. And there's a lot around that. But I want to share a little bit about my an experience that I've had for a lot of my life, which was almost like this feeling of getting stuck in irritability and almost like kind of just staying in that surface layer of like kind of being pissed off, like pissed off at my partner, pissed off at the world, like that kind of like pointing the finger and blame, like how could they do this? Like they're doing this to me, like I guess that victim consciousness. And it actually just felt safer to be in that level of like irritability and tension and just being in like constant tension and in those stories there was like a safety and a comfort in that because what was like beneath that as I began like exploring those deeper layers was like the fullness of my expression. It wasn't just the like there was a fear around fully expressing anger, the anger and the rage that was inside, but there was like a fear of really expressing at all the fullness of anything, like the fullness of anger, of grief, of joy, of pleasure. Like there was always like a holding back of my fullness and my expression. And so that's what I am excited to explore today. So welcome, Amberlee.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious what's resonating for you with all of that.
Yeah, I'm hearing, and I guess maybe that's something that I've heard as a child, or I've heard maybe through TV or through, yeah, other parents or other stories. Like I can just hear this voice going, "Control yourself, like get it under control." And I'm like, oh wow, yeah, like and the very like palpable um, sort of sensation of that in my body of like making sure that any like emotion or feeling or experience in my body is completely under my own control. And then, yeah, I guess what that feels like is, yeah, having and maybe if you're listening, you can kind of like close down your eyes a little bit and feel what that feels like in your body to like have everything under control or control everything. And for me, there's like an instantaneous tightness in the jaw, like um gritting or grinding or clenching is probably the best word, clenching of my teeth and my jaw. My shoulders start to come up and tense, and my fists start to like tighten, and I'm gripping. My elbows feel tense and in, and I can feel like almost every muscle from my toes up in my shins and around my knees, like every part of me is just making sure that nothing spills out from me, out from my body. Um, and so yeah, it's just this really weird experience of yeah, making sure that everything is under control. And then I'm like, oh, no wonder it's so challenging and so hard when you start working with people, when you start working with clients, or like even just working with yourself and like oh, just like soften and surrender into your experience. Like give yourself over to the emotions. Start to feel things fully. Start to um yeah, or like even just saying like, oh, like express this, or yeah, be with that. I'm like, you mean let go of all of this control that I'm holding? And it
Uh,
feels really hard. So
yeah.
yeah, I'm just yeah, just noticing that experience in my body as you're speaking. And I guess the other thing that was coming up was around the word expression, like yeah, there was a connection there that needed to be made, and that there was like a step before that almost, or almost the word expression is kind of encompassing this other word, um, and maybe the way that you're speaking to it, and it's like also feelings, like feelings kind of that first step, that first anchor in, because it's like, what am I supposed to be expressing, because I have actually no contact to anything other than this control on whatever's bubbling underneath. So yeah, that was the next word that I really felt into. It was like, oh, actually, like there's a resistance to feeling this, and without having any connection to feeling this, how would I then be able to express that? And that doesn't mean expressing it to another person. That just means, yeah, being in the feeling the fullness, and of what that means when I don't have this tight control on that. And that's where I feel like I'm like, there's the feeling it, the letting it be there and its softness. And then the control mechanism is kind of what then has to like I guess loosen and soften in order for some sort of expression to come out, for that to be moved through the body, is that letting go of that gripping and capping and tightening and clenching. So it was a fun little experience I was having in my body
Yeah.
as you were sharing.
Yeah, that's so funny as you share that. I'll just hand baby over.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really fascinating as you brought that to awareness of like, yeah, like, oh, just surrender, just let go, just express. And it's like, how long have I been like practicing and doing everything to hold it all together, and now you just want me to let it all
Mm.
go? Like, yeah, that and that's what I love about when we speak about pendulating, like touch it and then come back and touching and just like kind of meet your edge, and slowly like kind of that edge stretches and you kind of push it out a little bit more and a little bit more, and so that expression can come through a little bit more. But even with something else that came up as you were sharing was like I could almost, I had a flash of like my mom and remembering how she was in her irritability when I was younger. And I
Mhm.
heard like in my mind as you were sharing, like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Like as if there's something wrong with me because I'm expressing in some way, or I'm not happy with something, or I'm not being like the good girl. I'm not being compliant. And so I was like, what's wrong with you? Like, are you throwing a tantrum? And yeah, it's just like that fullness and that expression has been shut down for a long, long time. And so Amberlee and I are running a workshop called Own Your Wildfire, and it's about transforming your relationship specifically with anger, to really support you in reclaiming your power and your expression, your fullness. And so I'm so excited for this because it is something that I've definitely struggled with myself, like the expression around anger
Mm.
and really letting the rage out. And like often I would just feel this like building rage inside my body, like it's just like banging at the doors, like I need to get out, like I need to scream, I need to punch, I need to kick, I need to like run. Like a lot of the time I just felt like I needed to run, like I needed to move my body.
Mm.
And it was like, I don't know what to do with this energy. I don't know how to control it. I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to get rid of it. And
Mm.
then as I spoke more about this and connected with more women and heard their stories around this, like they also were struggling to fully be in their anger, their rage, their expression around this. and I can't remember where it was, but I remember that we were doing a call and it was coming up for a lot of the women in the space, and we're like, oh my God, we got to do a workshop on anger. And I was like, oh no, I've said it now, we've got to do it. But I'm actually like, I am really excited about this. And even like the energy and the frequency of the name of the workshop, like own your wildfire, it feels like it goes deeper than just anger, but it is like it's definitely focused around that emotion. But it feels like it's so much deeper. Like it's really connecting to your inner wildness, your inner power, your inner like your expression and your fullness, and letting that flow through. And as it always happens when we put something in place, it's like it triggers this initiation and you go on your own journey as it like leads up to the workshop. And I notice more and more for me this tendency to sit in the irritability rather as like a way of avoiding going into those deeper layers, because of the discomfort around that. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting and fascinating, and just being with that and also uncomfortable. But like,
Mm.
but yeah, just connecting to these deeper layers of like, oh, like there's still these parts of me that are saying it's not okay to be in your anger. It's not okay to be in your fullness, your wildness, your expression. And when we were going through the Becoming Masterclass, again, it was coming up for the women in the space. Like, it's not safe to me for me to be in my full embodied woman, my expression, my wildness, anger. And so, yeah, I'm just so excited to explore that in this deeper container.
Mm. And I know we spoke about yeah, how anger, I guess, gets to be, well, in this workshop, we'll specifically be using anger as a doorway in, because essentially what you're touching on is the way that how we interact with one thing is the way that we interact with all things. So it's really unlikely that we can be fully and completely expressed in one area, um, and or completely repressed in one area and then fully expressed in another. Like that's going to have an impact on others. Quite often if we're not fully expressing our rage, it's not likely that we're going to be fully expressing our sensuality or in our joy or in our pleasure or in our grief. They're things that kind of expand interconnectedly all together. So it's like, okay, can we choose this as our doorway into opening all of these areas into their fullness, and especially since it is a place that we have a lot of resistance to. It's a place that there is a lot of taboo. It is a place that we kind of deny a lot. Like, I hear a lot of people like, oh, I don't really have a lot of anger. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, whatever. Okay. You keep telling yourself that. We'll catch up in 6 months, a year, 2 years, whenever it is. Um, and we could choose any doorway, but I think this is, yeah, a really, really potent doorway to come to enter into and open up into this space and to actually be able to find where the gifts are and where the power is. And that's kind of where we're going to be centered in that workshop in particular. Um, and yeah, it was using your particular expression, or your particular posture or pattern around suppressing anger. I was feeling mine growing up was quite different. I My anger would turn inwards instead of outwards, and I would go into like quite heavy states of inner blame and depression and self-harm around anger. So it's like where a very healthy and true expression of anger could have like got me out of a situation, or enabled me to protect myself or put boundaries in place, or yeah, not be in a situation anymore that wasn't healthy for me. Instead, it like turned into this spiral of self-blame, and taking on all of the ownership of the situation. And like you said, this "what's wrong with me" message that I also received as a child. Anything something happened or I was upset, it was like this real frantic, jumping in, penetrative energy of like, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" And like sheer panic always, like, and not with the intention of, there's something wrong with you, but that's the message you're receiving, right? So yeah, that was another pattern that I went into around anger, and that I see other people in as well. And sometimes that where it's like I don't really feel much anger because it's completely deflated and in collapse and in self-attack. Like it is this internally self-weaponized yeah, energy that kind of just completely suffocates your own life force in a way. So using then anger as a doorway into accessing your life force again is completely essential, and has been completely essential for me. So I guess I just wanted to share that if that is an expression that is resonant to some others, from the other side of the constant irritability to like the constant self-destructive, self-harm, anger turned in upon myself, uh, learned protective mechanism as well. That's really, really common in women.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that you bring that into the space, because that's actually what I experienced growing up as well. It was more like internalized, and I would just, I guess, shut down. Like I wouldn't speak. I would be more like of a silent treatment kind of person, and so I would just kind of go inward and shut down, and I'd go into story and self blame and self beating myself up and like victim consciousness and why is this happening to me, and a lot of this, and I was just like, there was this fire inside that I didn't know what to do with, and it didn't feel safe to let it out, and so it just created more and more of this need to control and to hold everything together, and the tension in my body was just unreal. And yeah, I noticed similar, like that tension in the jaw and just everything like kind of bracing down, like holding it, like just trying to hold everything together. And then I've kind of gone in this like always like this pendulum experience where it's like internal and then it's outward, and it can get like a bit spitty and snappy and like attacky, especially like in relationship. I noticed that especially like in the earlier years of mine and Liam's relationship, before I'd really done much work around that, it was just like very attacky. And then they would lead to like shame and guilt and feeling there's something wrong with me, and I'd feel like this, like I was for a little while like saying tornado mon, like a tornado mon's coming out, like watch out. And we're just like, because eventually I couldn't hold it all together. I was holding so much that eventually it was like bursting at the seams, and like you go into a trigger spiral, and it was just like shit was just flying all over the place, and then you just like I would shut down again and internalize, and it was just a really unhealthy relationship to my emotional experience and what was coming up for me, and not knowing how to deal with that, not having the tools, not having the support. And that's why it's so important that we have these spaces, these containers, these workshops and these different programs, and people that can hold the space to support us through that journey. And that's actually what shifted my relationship to not only anger, but to expression and to all emotion, was actually being held and supported and given the tools to work through these. And that's why I keep showing up in these ways and co-creating with you and offering these different containers to support others to learn the tools to move through these, because these aren't things that we were taught. Like we were taught to shut down and to hold it all in and to like keep composed and to look a certain way and to be a certain way. And for a lot of us, we've lost that connection to our authenticity, our expression, our body, our emotions. And then when it like things start bubbling up, it's like, oh shit, I don't know what to do with this.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's such a debilitating cycle. So debilitating. Oh, and
Yeah.
so hard to break out of, yeah, on your own when you have um, no example of being in a healthy connection and relationship to the emotional body.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm like, oh, that stings.
Yeah.
It really
Yeah.
stings.
Yeah. And when I started to connect to my rage, I felt so much rage toward like, um, for some time it was toward my parents of like, why didn't you show me how to deal with this? Like, why? And it was like, there was so much rage that there was understanding of, yeah, they didn't know either and they weren't taught this either,
Mm,
but such a deep rage of like, why wasn't I held in this? Why wasn't I supported in this? And such a sadness. And that was part of my process as well to move through these layers to come back to that authentic expression
mm,
and knowing that going through this initiation for myself also has been what's allowed me to support others in this process and to create something like Own Your Wildfire, or co-create something like Own Your Wildfire to support others to go through that journey. And what I've found is when you connect in those spaces and when you're held, it is more accessible. So even though it's like there can
mm,
still be this maybe resistance of like letting go of that control, just like we were talking about, it's more accessible. Like you can touch it, you can be with it more, you can hold it more, and touch that expression more deeply because you know you're in a space where it's okay and it's all welcome.
mm,
And that's the frequency that we hold. It's like it's all welcome, it's all beautiful. It's like there's nothing wrong with you. This is actually so divine, and it's all welcome in the space. And yeah, it does open that portal to go into those deeper layers around expression and anger. And when we were workshopping this workshop and like feeling into where we were going to be leading you guys, it was like what came through was like anger as a portal to love. And
mm,
that just feels like it melts my heart kind of thing. Like it just feels
mhm.
so like as Amberlee would say, delicious. And like it just feels like, yes, like what if anger could be the portal to that deeper love, that deeper acceptance,
Mm,
that authenticity that so many of us are looking for, that permission to just be ourselves in our fullness. Yeah, just like I can already just like with that anger as a portal to love just feels like this softening in my body.
there's a lot of relief.
Mm,
There's
yeah.
so much relief in hearing that. And yeah, the word portal as well just ties in quite beautifully to because as you were speaking about your process with coming into kind of like some of that anger or rage around like why has it been this way? Why haven't I been given these tools? Um, and then like whilst also knowing that your parents are doing like the best that they can and they weren't given those tools and all of those elements, like I could just feel in that moment like quite often what we get told to do or what we think we have to do in those moments is skip to this like acceptance from the logical mind, which denies, the emotional experience of like that anger and that grief, that are completely and totally 100% valid in
Mm,
our experience. What they don't have to do is like spew all over our family. Like that doesn't have to be outwardly expressed to anybody. But if we're not internally acknowledging that and allowing that to be felt, it's just the continuation of that gripping and suppressing and shoving down for it to be like sitting there bubbling to explode at some other point with some other unrelated thing, because it's just sitting there waiting. And yeah, I just felt that, because what comes when you enter that portal and you, yeah, be with that feeling in its fullness, so that it moves through you and is allowed to have freedom and liberation in the body, as you just come into a state of deeper love. Like, that's ultimately all that happens, and we're so scared that something terrible is going to happen. But ultimately, when we actually are making a choice to cultivate the ability and capacity to be with, rage or anger or grief in a more intimate and like choosing it quicker is almost the thing, for me. Like, it's a quick and easy, almost no-brainer choice to just like allow it to be there, rather than to wait 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years until it like explodes. um, it just gets to be this, nothing bad happens from that space. Just it
Yeah.
comes into more love, it alchemizes into more love. And then from that space, yeah, maybe we have to make some choices, because maybe that anger has been showing us where we've been tolerating something that, and we've been crossing our own boundaries. And then there's some grief to feel because we're abandoning ourselves in that process. And anger is showing us that we're self-abandoning, and that's really hard and painful to feel. But then once we do, we come back into a state of authenticity and to experience more loving presence with ourselves, that we then from there can make the hard choice to change a situation in our lives that's triggering that, or creating this low level activation all the time, or whatever. So it's like, whatever angle you throw it at me, I can totally see where actually, no, it is just a portal to love. It is a portal to
Yeah.
deeper intimacy and access to our true essence. Like, there's no other way I can actually view that now.
And that's what like Own Your Wildfire actually feels like. It's like a conscious, intentional leaning in rather than waiting
Mm,
for the inevitable explosion. Because there's only so
yeah.
long and so much that we can hold in and down and together. Like when we're like so tense and we're just holding everything, there's only so long we can actually do that, and there's only so much we can bury and hold before it just like it does explode. And we notice those in triggers. We
Mm,
notice like all of a sudden we're like holding it, holding it, holding it, holding it, and then it's just like bah, like just comes out. And
mm,
that's what I would notice was like a lot of the time my partner would get like the wrath, like, and I even noticed it prior to this relationship when like I'd been holding so much toward like different people, and then like one
mm.
poor innocent being would just be there at the wrong time and would just like say something and just like bah, like like the rage monster, like the fury, like oh, it was just very powerful actually. Like when you
Yeah.
really feel the energy of that, it's like this just power that just like purges out of you. Then because it was like triggered and like it wasn't intentional, it wasn't conscious, it just was like exploded. It would often lead into shame and guilt and like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, or I said that, like what am I gonna do? Like I didn't want to be seen ever again. I just wanted to hide in my hole and just never come out, and just like yeah, I just wanted to hide. Like it just felt I went into the internalizing and the self-shaming, self-blaming, self-hatred, like tearing myself up. And that was just so harmful. And then there's so much healing and integration needed from that. Whereas when we consciously, intentionally lean into our expression, our anger, our rage in like these safe held containers, which is what I experienced for myself as well when I finally started to allow myself to touch these places and to get support.
Mm,
That's when the alchemization happens. That's when you're like, you come into that self acceptance, that love, that authenticity, and like, oh, like a settledness inside of yourself, like, oh, it's
mm,
okay. And it's so nourishing and like, oh, it's okay that I'm feeling this. And often beneath the anger is what I've noticed is like a deep sadness and a grief. Like that's what I found when I got beneath the rage toward like, why weren't these tools given to me? Deeper than that was a grief that these weren't given to really any of us. Not me, not my parents, not their parents. And it's just this generational thing that's been passed down again and again. And there's such a deep sadness. And then it's like feeling into the collective, like how many other women, like, or beings, and like how many of us are really struggling or struggling to express, struggling to be in our authenticity, don't have the tools, don't have the support, don't have these containers that are available to them, don't know where to start. And there's just this like, oh, the depth of grief is pretty profound. And so to touch that, because anger was like that portal into this depth, to touch that, I really did need that support to be held in feeling that grief. And then as I felt that and was able to be with that and integrate that, like, yeah, you do come to this place of settledness and ease and love and just this desire to support as many people as I can, like this love for humanity and this love for like, I want to help. I want to be part of like the rising up and the shifting and the healing, and I want to support as many people as I can. And then it's like, oh, like there's such like a deep love inside of me that I wasn't able to touch prior to going through the portal of anger, the portal of grief, and just like tapping into this deep love, which is very profound. And noticing like even that is an intense experience to be with, like that depth of love, and to let that flow through. Like I really had to expand my capacity to be with my emotional body, to be with these different energies, to access that love and to really hold that love in my body. When I reflect on it, it was so much easier and more comfortable to be in the irritability and just not really feel much at all. Just be like tense, hold it all together, don't look at it, don't feel it, just keep trudging on, just keep putting one foot in front of the other, just don't look at it, don't look at it, don't look at it. I looked. And then it bursts and you're like, it's like so overwhelming and there's just shit all over the place. You're like, I don't know how to deal with this. But that's what I love about the conscious intentional work of like that invitation to just lean in to your capacity. It doesn't have to be like a diving into the deep end. It's like a leaning in, pendulating back into resourcing, leaning in, pendulating back into resourcing. And prior to being able to like really resource, it was like a touch it, dissociate, touch it, dissociate. And that was part of my process. That was my pendulation. The more I practiced resourcing, it's like touch it, resource, touch it, resource. And that's really like, even with the Own Your Wildfire workshop, it's not necessarily about like just throwing you in the deep end. It's like, let's lean in. Let's see what's here. Let's go layer by layer. Let's take it at your own pace and let's just feel our way through this and notice where our edge is. Meet the edge rather than trying to force and push and trying to get to like maybe we're trying to get to the deep love as fast as possible. Like, can we actually meet each layer with love, with compassion, with presence, and go at the pace that our body, our nervous system needs us to go?
Yeah, there's a really important intention behind the way that it's structured, so that there's like really what we're doing is we're bringing an unshaming to wherever we're at in that process, wherever we're at in that moment, and not expecting or trying to shift or move it anywhere else, but just oh, okay, this is where it's been for me, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing I have to like, there's nowhere I have to shift this to. And then I guess, being in a group space where that's witnessed and held with love and not shamed or expected to be any different. And then that sort of relief of witnessing others' experience where you're like, oh my God, me too. Oh yeah, I do that too. Oh yeah, that I used to do that too. Oh my gosh, that was a big part of like how I responded or reacted to life for such a long time. Oh my gosh, I know that pain. I know that resistance. Um, yeah. Oh, it feels so lovely already.
Yeah. And what was coming through as you were sharing was like it's not necessarily about going from 0 to 100 of like I'm completely holding it all
Mm,
together and now I'm going to go to like 100% of wildness and expression. It's actually like it almost feels like a owning your process, like a owning like this is the pace that
yeah.
I feel to go at. This is the pace that is of the greatest service for me and my journey. And I can just gently and compassionately unravel those layers. And if I
Mm,
can touch that anger, or like if I can connect to my scream or my roar or my kick and like my fight or like that anger and that expression, but it's knowing that you can connect to your anger in your own way. Like I've had some pretty profound journeys and yeah, journeys that I've been guided on where I felt myself just holding it all together. Like I didn't actually
mm,
I didn't let go in the way that we think that we may need to. So I wasn't able to speak or to say what I was being invited to say. And I just felt
mm,
everything
mm,
in me just holding it all together. And I felt such a deep pain. And I actually just like I was almost like I felt stuck in that. But when I reflected on it, I was
mm,
like, actually, that's where I needed to be in allowing myself to be with the experience of holding and the pain of holding it all together, the pain of the constriction in my throat. Like I felt it so intensely. I was like, oh my God, this
mm,
is the pain that I've been avoiding feeling through distracting.
mhm,
Um, and as I let myself just be with it, there was a dissolving of it without me needing to necessarily scream it out or roar it out or throw a tantrum or whatever we might think of expressing our anger to be. I found that even just by holding that, being in it, actually allowed a release to happen.
mm,
And recently, I actually had a call with a client and I shared this. I guided a journey inside the Embody membership about actually being with the tension, like leaning into the
mm,
tension rather than like trying to shift it and release it. Let's tense up, let's just tense everything rather than trying to change it or force something to happen. And then with my client, as I invited her to be with her tension, it spontaneously dissolved. She's like, "Oh, it's just gone." Like
mm.
wow. And then I guided that in the embodied membership of like, let's pendulate, let's go into this tension, let's release it. Let's go into this tension, release it. And you'll find that actually by allowing yourself to be with what's here, it will naturally just do its thing of integrating
Mm,
and alchemizing. And when we do that in a safe space, when we're really held, it feels safe to go into it. It feels safe to actually
mm,
embrace the tension, embrace the emotion. Yeah, and it's pretty magical what can happen in that space. So that's really what we're exploring here is like, let's actually just see what's alive inside of you. Let's meet that. Let's be with
mm,
that and see what unravels, see what's ready to be expressed, to be met, to move through. And let's own the process, like let's own the journey rather than like thinking we need to get somewhere or force something or achieve something all the time. It's like,
mm,
oh, let's just take the pressure off and
mhm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a different way of um, allowing ourselves to be led by the body and then meeting what's there and then allowing the actual wisdom and intelligence of that part to be, met and revealed. But so often what happens when we're not meeting these parts and we're just trying to skip over them and we're just trying to like control them with the mind or avoid or run away or yeah, fix or change or yeah, look in the other direction. like you shared,
Yeah.
is we actually don't get to listen to, yeah, the beautiful wisdom seed from that experience that our body's just trying to show us, that this part that really desires to just be met
Mm.
has, and it's not, and we don't get that wisdom from just like getting to the other side or whatever it is, that it's just in the meeting of, and then there's the, oh, that's like, that's all you've been trying to tell me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
It's so much easier than, yeah, the pain is all in the just trying to avoid or resist or, yeah, whatever else is the painful part's never actually like in the fully meeting, or that painful part is actually so short. It's
Yeah.
so short. Like, whereas there's this big buildup of like this anticipation of the pain,
Yeah.
that's actually the most painful part. And then in the actual meeting, like, yeah, maybe, yeah, when the heart breaks open, when we feel that pain, when we feel that grief, yeah, that is painful, but it's so short and it subsides, and
Mm.
there's an instantaneous relief of actually meeting that pressure. That's like, oh, I wouldn't have got this if I didn't actually go through this doorway.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing when you have those experiences. And I found for me it took multiple of having those experiences to be like, oh, actually it is really like more painful in the anticipation and the resisting when I actually go
Yeah,
into that leaning in, that meeting, which I've always found easier to do when someone's holding that space for me.
yeah,
Because
definitely.
it just feels terrifying. That's what I found for me. It was just terrifying to touch it, but then when I was held and I was able to lean in, I was like, that feels so much better. Like, it's like, it does feel like really short, especially because often we'll hold on to things for days, weeks, months, years, decades. And then we finally meet it and
Hmm.
it's like, that release. It's so, like, they just feel that you come to that place of settledness and ease and like, relief. So,
Hmm.
yeah, like if this is something that is resonating for you, if this is something that maybe like you have struggled with and you feel ready to explore this, just know that it is taking it at your own pace. We are there to support you every step of the way. I'm really excited for this journey. I think it's going to be such a potent portal, a really beautiful healing and experience where it's just a real big permission slip just to be
Mm.
you, to show up where you're at, to meet what's ready to be met, to move through those layers together. It just feels like a huge permission slip just to be in your expression wherever that is at.
Mm. Yeah, and the only other part that I feel to maybe share about that is, I guess some of the exhaustion that I was feeling into, like the exhaustion and holding all of these parts. And, um, you know, part of what we've spoken into is like what's available when you're no longer doing that, and the reclamation of your own inner wildfire and
Yeah.
tending to that fire that's available through actually like not having all of your energy being pulled into controlling.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
yeah, like, oh, just feeling yourself fill back up from the inside with your own inner fire, with your own inner life force, your own inner energy, and
Yeah.
feeling really resourced from the inside by not clamping down and capping that all of the time from the mind and from the outside.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just really allowing and making space for that to be available in that process as well is, yeah, super, super powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. The liberation of that energy, like what can I do with all that energy that has been like
Mm,
stored in like the reservoirs of like just holding everything together. Like once that energy is liberated, like the nourishment that you can receive from that, the creations that you can start to actually move towards, like what you want to create in your world and in your
yes.
life. Like, yeah, I definitely noticed that for me, and I feel like that's been actually, now that you mention it, it's been a massive part of like what I've created up to this point, is because I liberated so much energy instead of like holding everything together. There was so much release that I was like, oh, I've actually got something to work with now. Like there's something to play with here. And often I hear like people say like, how are you doing all of the things, and you've got a family, and you've got a partner, and you're creating this and you're doing that. And it's like, well, when you're not spending all of your energy holding everything together, what can we create, and what can we invest that energy into? Yeah, pretty cool.
I'm excited.
Yeah, so exciting. Oh, I like that.
Like, oh, I already feel it happening. It's so
Yeah.
good. It's so rich.
It's like the workshopping call that we did prior to the Becoming Masterclass. I already felt like the shifts and the recalibration happening prior to the initiatory experience of the masterclass. And same with this, with Own Your Wildfire. It's like the recalibration begins when the intention is set. Like I feel like it already began when we first like even mentioned doing a workshop on anger. And that's what this feels like. It feels like a recalibration. It feels like a rewiring, bringing these parts of ourselves online. And yeah, I just keep hearing like the permission slip, because like what we said at the beginning, like what's wrong with you? Like hold yourself together, keep it together. Like it's actually like a permission to let go, to be in that fullness. Yeah. Oh, I'm excited. Yeah, so thank you, Amberlee, for another potent conversation. I'd love to maybe just take a few deep breaths here as we just let this energy land. Maybe let the body move or shake, or even just being in stillness and noticing how this transmission, this energy is landing for you. Maybe you're feeling called to join us, or maybe this conversation was exactly what you needed at this time. So let's just take some breaths together. Feeling that energy land. And allow this energy that's landing to guide you and to support you moving forward on your own journey. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.